right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Nurse Charms Live. I am your host, Nurse Charms. For those of you who are tuning in for your first time, we have a lot going on that we're going to get into tonight. I know you see a guest on the screen. I'm going to be introducing him in just one moment. We have a live Q&A format, so you're welcome to hop on the comment feed and ask as many questions as you like. And whatever questions we can't get to throughout the broadcast, I always circle back and I'll answer them for you. So if you're watching this on a replay, that's cool too. You can still ask your questions. All right. I always have to give everybody my infamous disclaimer. I want everybody to know that we are not being endorsed, right? Nobody's paying us, telling us what to say. Our thoughts are our own, and these are for educational purposes only. If you hear any health information from me tonight, make sure you follow up with your physician because, I don't know your full health background. So I don't want you to just take something at face value and run. But, this is meant to be educational. But, so tonight we're going to switch it up a little bit. I've been having nurses and physicians and everything come join me for a discussion about COVID-19, but we're going to approach it from a little different angle. We're going to talk about, the economic impact and, financial with businesses and, a little bit of get into politics of, this COVID-19 pandemic that's been going on. So without further ado, Geoff, how you doing? What's up? Thanks for joining me. You good?
I'm doing well. No, I appreciate the invite. I'm doing well.
Yes, of course. So go ahead and introduce yourself. I always have my guests introduce themselves. I don't want to mess up any titles or anything like that. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a senior vice president at Aon. Aon is a large insurance brokerage, probably the largest in the global market, 60,000 employees. We manage risk. We manage large insurance programs. So healthcare, whether it's the auto industry, life sciences, big pharma, government contracts, we manage about 30% of the world's insurance spend. I'm originally from Detroit, but I live in Philadelphia. I travel quite a bit. I have clients in the US, abroad, everywhere. And so that's pretty much what we do. So we've obviously been super involved with COVID-19 and our response to help clients who many of whom have 100,000 plus employees or are small businesses, right? So that's the space we're in. Happy to be here. And we've been extremely busy over the past, let's say, 2 months dealing with COVID-19.
Yeah, I can imagine. I just want to say, everybody watching, please share this video. I want to grow this broadcast, so please share this video. Ask all your friends to tune in. All right. So how were you impacted by COVID-19? How was your business? Have you continued to work through this, or did you guys have to work from home? Have you been in the office? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so in my particular role, I probably only go to the office once or twice a week. Anyway, so I'm usually traveling a lot. So I've been basically working from home, right, for 2.5 months. Basically on video calls like this or conference calls pretty much all day and living through my email. So it hasn't changed much for me. Our company, in regard to our competition, was one of the first companies to come out and say, we're not cutting any employees. We're not firing any employees. So for a company with 60,000 employees, that's a pretty, big declaration to make early on when this pandemic broke. So I'm happy to work for a company that has refused to cut any employees. So that's kind of where we're at, but it has made a big impact. I mean, clients who are on a fee base, if they're paying us, let's say, $200,000 a year, they're asking for us to reduce that fee because they're going through stress right now. So it kind of is what it is, but we're helping them get through it.
Yeah. That's I'm glad that you emphasized that point of your company not wanting to cut out any employees, because I've been reading some studies saying that a lot of employees who were thinking that they were going to go back to their job are not in fact going to go back because the economy has just been taking, we're going to be talking about this. The economy has just been taking a drastic hit. I just got the news alert. JC Penney's is filing for bankruptcy. A lot of these big companies have been, filing for bankruptcy or just closing down, and it's just really impacting the world. And it's like we got this balance, we got to fix the health, we got to fix this pandemic, we want to keep people alive, and then it's like we want to keep the economy alive. So it's all these challenges going on. And then yesterday I heard that the Federal Reserve, they issued their report. Every year they come out with their report on the well-being of the household well-being report of the economy, right? Every year they do this. So they did a little small study of 1,000 people. It was from April 3rd to April 6th. And I don't have all the data on like what types of people they interviewed, but basically they interviewed these people, right? And they just wanted to get some idea, of where they stand, since a lot of businesses are closed down, and, we got these stay-at-home orders. So I'm just going to read the results. Just a little small excerpt from that report. It said that these are the findings. It said that individuals who lost a job or had reduced hours reported difficulty in paying their bills. As of early April, 18% of adults said they could not pay all of their current month bills in full, with greater difficulty in paying bills among 35% of people who were laid off or had their hours reduced. So that's significant, because that's the whole issue that's causing so much fear and worry. Is like, how am I gonna pay my mortgage? How am I gonna keep my business open, put food on the table? Everybody has all of these stresses right now. I know Nancy Pelosi, she just introduced this $3 trillion bill, you know what I'm saying, which I don't think the Senate, I don't think the Republicans are feeling that right now. So they're probably going to be bumping heads for a little while trying to figure out something, which is going to cost all of us time. But what, with your background experience, what are some suggestions? I mean, I'm sure you've been following and hearing this too. Like, they've got this $0 month in mortgage. That's part of the $1 trillion thing. They got some more stimulus money. That's another thing. They got all these different ideas. It's really like a Christmas list, So what are some suggestions that you think that, realistic and that can help us during these times? Because obviously people just don't have the money. Even going back to work, there's going to be changes, social distances. You got to operate at 25%. So like, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, you talk about all these big stimulus bills, right? So, and Nancy Pelosi is trying to pass another big one. I think the only thing that can probably get us through this, and this is not really a popular idea, and I don't know if I agree with it. I'm just making a point in regard to what we've done with these trillions of dollars. But the only thing I think that can really help Americans get through this time is some type of universal income, right? Some type of payment where we agree to give people, let's say, $1,500, $2,000 a month for the next at least 3 or 4 months, because the stimulus bills just aren't making it to everyday people, whether it's the single mom in the inner city, the rural family in Kentucky. It's just not making it to them, right? And even the small businesses that really need the loans, many of them don't have banking relationships, right? And it's not a surprise that many of those small businesses are minorities, right? So universal income is something that presidential nominee Yang was big on. But I really think if we're not going to get money to in people's hands, you have to pass some type of universal income. I don't think that'll ever get passed because that's not popular on the right side of the aisle. And of course, the Senate is controlled by Republicans. But I think that's the one. It's not a silver bullet, but I think that's probably the best solution to get over this hump. I don't think it'll happen, but I think that's the one thing that I think can possibly help Americans out in real time, because unemployment right now, I think it's 16, 17%. It's going to soar to the mid 20s, probably by the end of this month. Right. So, the last time we had unemployment in the 20 percentile range was, I don't know, probably the Great Depression. Right. So it's just tragic, but people need money in their hands, like you said.
So, okay, so that was one suggestion. What would be more of a realistic solution that you think the Democrats and Republicans, because basically it's just a stall, you know what I'm saying? Like, Nancy has this, we got Mitch McConnell, and, everything is stalling, and literally every minute that they waste stalling on this, just kind of waste time. So what would you think could be a realistic if they're not going to give out these, $1,500, $2,000 checks, which I think would be a great idea as well. What would be something else that's kind of realistic to help us pay our bills? Based on this data, people can't pay their bills.
Right. Some type of relief for mortgages and rent. Definitely. Right. Like,
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest bill for most people. Right.
Yeah.
If you say, look, we're going to suspend mortgage and rent payments for 4 months, or some type of relief right there, I think is a big deal. But also, some type of guarantee that utilities, your water and electricity won't get shut off too. And that's, again, for most people, maybe $80, $120 a month, something like that. But again, you can't do anything once your electricity and water get cut off, right? So some type of relief right there, right? And then I think the biggest thing, and this continues to be an issue between both parties, is healthcare, right? There's so many people I know, mainly minorities, who are afraid to go to the doctor because they're afraid to accumulate a bill that can obviously bankrupt them. Right. And during a pandemic like this, you don't want people scared to go to the hospital, right? Because one, it impacts their health, but more importantly, it impacts everybody that they're around. And if you're in the inner city or even in some rural communities, you just can't socially distance, right? If there's 5 people living in a 1-bedroom house, like, there's no way you can socially distance, right? So if you have it, everybody else has it, then eventually you got to go to work, right? Many of these people have to go to work. They can't, work from home like myself or maybe you. So you have to go to work. You just continue to spread it. So I think some type of relief for mortgages, mortgages/rent, utilities, as well as some type of healthcare relief where people can at least not be afraid to go get tested and cure a bill, I think is a big deal. And that, I think, is a little bit more realistic than universal income, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm hoping they can come to some type of, agreement in regard to one of those, or if not all of them.
Right. I totally agree, because like now that suggestion is more realistic, because then the government doesn't have to pay out anything. But I don't know how how the landlords, how all that will work. That would be a whole nother decision they would have to make. But I do think that would be more realistic. And you're right, people are getting it from home. They did a study and it said that 90% of people, they listed all the ways. Number one was home, because people are out and they're coming back, and people are just transmitting it, to their loved ones, kids, spouse, whatever. And so that's how a lot of the transmission is occurring. I'm gonna hop over here and just acknowledge all the people who are commenting. Looks like people are just giving us shout outs. Hey, Latrice, what's up? That's my girl. She's supportive. Let's see. Tony's, he shared the video. Thank you. I appreciate. Let's see. Junebug just says, God bless nurses. Thank you. I appreciate those blessings. And Stacy, she says, Canadians receive $2,000 per month for 4 months. Do you know anything about that? I haven't studied anything what they're doing in Canada, but that was what you were saying.
Yeah, I do. I heard about that, and they did that like early on. I want to say, and she might know more about it. Stacy might know more about it, but I want to say they agreed to do that like 2 months ago, right? They agreed to do that a while ago. But yeah, I think that's a good solution. I think our economy is a little bit different than Canada, but I still think we have the means to get that done, right?
Yeah. No doubt. So I love Revolt. I watch that on YouTube, time to time. And so Joe Budden, and it's a cast of people that co-hosted with him. And they talk about different issues or whatever. And so he was interviewing Senator Kamala Harris. I don't know if you watched it or not, but he asked her the question, which was pretty a polarizing question, you know what I'm saying, to ask a senator. But he's like, are they trying to kill us? And this was in reference to, Georgia. They were one of the first people to open up. I think it was, it was on April 24th, Georgia, they opened up their economy, all businesses, open or whatever. And that it was kind of a scary thing. I know some people down there, they were terrified, but it was like a 50-50. Some people were terrified and some people were just happy, to get back to work. But I know Dr. Fauci, he was against it because he mentioned that, the governor down there just kind of leapfrogged and opened up the city, the state, without going through those phases. Because the White House, when this all came about, they put out these phases of reopening or whatever. So we're supposed to be following those guidelines, so it's a gradual thing, not just like boom. So would you support any theory that they're trying to kill Black people? Because we've been hearing, not just on that particular show, I've been hearing people on social media, just different people, conscious people, thinking that this thing with COVID and Black people is some type of genocide. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so many of the states that have like Georgia, I think has a Republican governor, right? So I think many of the states that have been quick to open up, Georgia, Texas, some other states, I think when you have access to the data, right, and that in I think every state, if not most of them, African Americans are 2 or 3 times likely to not only get the virus but die from the virus, when they only represent in some of these states, mid-teens percentage of the state, maybe 20-30% of the state, but they represent 60-70% of the cases. When you have access to that data and then you continue to push forward and open the states, I don't know if it's a legitimate question, but I can see how a lot of people who aren't privy to economics and finance can think like that, right? And so, again, if you're not going to give some type of universal income, give some type of mortgage or rent relief, right? People psychologically are dying to get outside, right? If you don't have means to the ability to work from home, right? And maybe convert your work, or you have savings saved up where you can pay rent, you can pay mortgage and live comfortably. Even if it's going out to grab a drink, right? You want to do it. And unfortunately, many of the people who are not in the situation to work from home are African Americans or minorities, right? So I don't think it's a conspiracy to kill African Americans. I think Joe Biden was hoping to get Kamala in a weak moment, maybe, but the data clearly states that African Americans and people of color are much more likely to contract the virus and die from the virus, right? So if you're not going to make certain amendments and policies to specifically address the healthcare of those communities and you open it up, I think again, I don't know if it's a fair question, but I can see how somebody would jump to that conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on Georgia, I seen on social media a picture posted. Everybody, this was the first week that they opened. Everybody was lined up at the Louis Vuitton store. You know what I mean? Like they were doing their little social distancing. I don't think it was 6 feet though, may have been 3 or 4 feet. But just to see, where people have their priorities at, soon as the state is open. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? And maybe you want to do a little public service announcement on how people should spend their money during a pandemic,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, I think I saw a similar picture of like, it would seem like thousands of people in line for Michael Jordan's in Atlanta, like last week or the week before. There was no social distancing whatsoever going on. It's just tough, right? Because you hate to believe it, but it's probably some of that money might be the stimulus check that they received, right? And so I think it just comes down to priorities, right? Whether it's getting extra groceries, whether it's putting money to the side, whether it's putting in the savings account and just letting it sit for a rainy day. I just think it comes down to priorities. But we live in an immediate gratification society, right? You need something like that, right? And people have been on lockdown for 6, 7, 8 weeks, some longer. So unfortunately, that's what you see happen. But I wish it all comes back down to financial literacy. I know we've talked about it in the past, and it's something that plagues our community, the ability to kind of have financial literacy and understand what to do if you get extra income, or if you get income in a tight jam, what to do with it. But it kind of is what it is. African Americans aren't the only people running to the Louis V store, but you like to see better judgment in a time like this, because you don't know if many of those people are going to get their jobs back, and you just don't know what the economy looks like 12 months from now. I hate for you to need $700 or $800 that you spend on some shoes or a purse a year from now because the economy hasn't recovered, or you didn't get your job back, or something like that, right? So it's just uncertain times. You hate to see stuff like that, but it's definitely going back to financial literacy, right? It's a big deal in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been seeing throughout this pandemic, we've been seeing technology step up a lot. You know, they're trying to use technology to kind of identify people who, when they do their contract tracing, you know, if you come up positive, first thing they do, they want to ask you who you've been around and then notify those people, you know, so everybody can go get tested. You could kind of isolate it. You know, you don't just have people out here continuing to spread COVID-19. So, and then, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about this because some people feel like it may be a violation of their privacy. But I mean, I know that you have to like opt into it. It's not like somebody's just going to tap into your phone and, you know, oh, I noticed that you were at this bar or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so how do you feel about that? Apple and Google, they have a partnership. So they're looking at creating some type of contact tracing system, and then there's some other companies, you know, and this information will be, you know, given to medical providers and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts on using technology to do some of this contact tracing?
Yeah, I think technology has gotten to be a little scary, right? I mean, I joke with friends and say I was, joking about buying this type of car, and then 20 minutes later, I see those advertisements
I
um,
know.
on
Yeah.
my Facebook, right? So I think it's scary, and I think many people are worried about, okay, they're following me. They can see everywhere I go, everybody I talk to. And if I think the sole purpose is if it's genuine to find out if you have the virus, where did you go? Who did you maybe talk to? Who did you spread it to? I'm for it. It's just that a lot of times, we've seen this in the past with Facebook getting drugged before Congress and Twitter and other big social media platforms. It's just what's going on with the data, right? Because the data is expensive and it's extremely valuable, right? And so I think it comes down to those privacy notices. But if it's a genuine attempt to follow the virus, get people the aid, whether it's vaccines or get them the care that they need before it's too late, I'm all for it. I think people have a right, though, and a reason to be a little hesitant, in regard to contact tracing and technology trying to quote unquote solve the problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Somebody else commented on here. Johnny. Hey, what's up, Johnny? Thanks for joining us. Um, Next question I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about Congress response, you know, to small business owners? You know, there were loans available, you know, the PPP and the EIDL. There were grants, some states and counties, they made grants available. Um, in the Black community, you know, some people seem to feel that they weren't included in any of that because, you know, you had to do a credit check, and some people credit aren't good, or, you know, if your business isn't established in terms of like your paperwork being, you know, legit, you have your EIN, you literally have an establishment license, you know, you have your bank and all your stuff in order. If you know, if you don't have any of those things, then, you know, you may not even be qualified to even file. So saying all that, what do you think? How do you feel about their response? Do you think they did a good job, you know, with offering these programs, or they still need to do more, or they could have did something specific for, you know, Black people because they have the challenges? How do you feel?
Right. Yeah, I think they were. I think they were a little slow to respond. Just in everything in regard to COVID-19, but specifically, small business relief. I also think the guidelines or the quote unquote requirements that were in place in regard to who gets the aid, who can apply, I think they also kind of botched that too, right? Whenever you see the LA Lakers, which is a $1 billion franchise, can apply for a $20 million loan that should have been meant for smaller, like traditional small businesses, the system is obviously broken, right? That's not necessarily on the LA Lakers to not apply. That's more so on how the policy was set and who was allowed to apply, right? And so I think the other thing we just spoke about was just the relationship with bankers, right? A lot of small businesses, they bootstrapped to get where they're at, right? They saved money from their current job to get where they're at. So when they fall on hard times and they need access to the small business money that's quote unquote been allotted for them, they don't have the business relationships to call their local bank or a global bank, right? And so that's
Right.
that's part of the issue. The LA Lakers can call their banking relationship and get it done like that with all the paperwork. They also, these applications, from what I understand, are not easy to complete, right? So if you're not in that mode constantly where you're dealing with the banks, or you don't have a finance background, or maybe a legal contractual background, it's even another
Right.
big hurdle, right? So again, I think they were a little slow to release the aid, but I think they could have also did better to make sure it got in the hands of traditional, real small business owners who really needed the money to get through this tough time.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Just hopping over here. Johnny is very proud. Thank you. Thank you. Always great to hear encouragement. Listen,
Me and Johnny go back.
people are
We go way back.
all right. That's what's up. People are very message driven. We haven't really seen people, within the Black community. I'm just going to use that for example, since they're the one who have we're not there, I'm African American, since we're the one who have the, highest mortality rate, we're dying the easiest among all the races. So why hasn't anybody or what suggestions do you have for people to like put some type of message out there, like in terms of wearing masks? Even that, if somebody did like some big campaign, to kind of make it cool or hip to wear masks or, social distances, I just feel like we need some type of, message to help, really drive home how important this is, because as we open, a lot of states are open. I thought I read it was up to like 48 states have opened. Maybe not. When I say open, partially open or all the way open. So, we can't just be like, whoa, yay, we open glad that was over. There's still the threat, there's still the risk until we get a vaccine. So what are some suggestions you have for that? Or do you think that's an appropriate thing to do? Or I just feel like more could be done, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree. And there's just a ton of bad information out there in social media. We always talk about misinformation is actually worse than no information, right? And so,
Right.
specifically for our community, we're the ones that really need to be working on social distancing. We're the ones that really need the face gear and to be washing our hands and that whole nine. And we don't really have sound messaging
Right.
outside of just family and friends or folks like you who are doing platforms like this, who's a medical professional, and other nurses who are keeping their networks, alert of what to do, why you need to do it, right? And so I think the Black community in general is also skeptical of healthcare, healthcare practices in big hospitals, just in general, because of a history of being mistreated, right? So we definitely need that messaging. It's not there, but I don't, and that's not to say there aren't people behind the scenes doing the work. I know some people, and I won't mention names, they are doing the work, right? But there's not enough of them. That number needs to be multiplied. So we definitely need that echoed in our communities. You hate to see, I think it was a couple of weeks it made the national news of a Chicago house party, right? Where there was like,
yes.
Yeah, there was like thousands of people in this house party. And you could just see from the pictures very few had masks on. A lot of young, healthy people aren't going to be impacted by it. But again, it's when you go to see your grandmother, so when you go to see your mom who might have diabetes or might be sick or might be, other vulnerable health issues, that's the fear, right? And so again, that consistent messaging, I think, is important, and we definitely need more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on keeping people on lockdown? Some states were full draconian, was it a little bit too much? Or do you think, that's what we need to do for as long as we need to do it? Or do you think we should be more on those who are vulnerable? Those, when I say vulnerable, that's people living in the inner city, like you mentioned diabetes, any comorbidities, hypertension, the elderly, immunocompromised, all those vulnerable. Should we focus on keeping those groups at home and then, everybody else move forward? What are your thoughts?
I agree. We definitely need to keep the stay-at-home policies, state stay-at-home policies in place. You can see just over the past week, the states that open up beaches, the states that have opened up other, venues, outside of just like traditional curbside pickup, which is like in most states right now, I believe. You've seen like
Right.
rapid spikes in people who contracted the virus, which inevitably means more people will die, right? So again, I know our economy needs relief. I know businesses need relief. I know states are on the verge of bankruptcy. But if you can come up with trillions of dollars to bail out the banks, other big industries, small business loans that technically haven't gone to many of the small businesses that need them, instead you have the LA Lakers and other big businesses taking out loans, then you can figure that part out too, right? So I know people are frustrated, but we definitely need to see an uptick in virtual mental health services, right? The ability to chime into something like this and just get tips for your kids who are, at studying from at home, right? And you who can't leave the house, or you're being told not to leave the house. You just see all these videos on social media and people just disobeying these laws, and these, not laws, but these rules, which are really geared to keeping them safe, right? And it's people are losing it. It's not good, but you need consistent messaging, But I'm definitely in fan of keeping these stay-at-home orders intact for as long as it takes. And I think it'll just be one of those things we look back on and say, look, if we do that, we did what we needed to do to get through a tough time. If we continue to let these stay-at-home policies lax and let people kind of go out and go to the parks and, so on and so on, we're going to see this thing continue to tick up. I think right now we're losing anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people a day are dying, right? So, and we decided to open up, right? So that clearly was the wrong decision.
So I guess give a little analysis on Mitch McConnell, because initially, he was saying that the states can just file bankruptcy if they need to, because I heard him he was a radio guest. I can't remember who, he was on somebody's podcast or radio show, and that's what he said, if they need to file bankruptcy, because in that messaging, he was trying to say like some states who have already been mismanaging their money, he felt like the feds shouldn't give them some money, for already mismanaging. If it's a different case, then yeah, they can consider that. But now he's kind of, seems like he's kind of rethinking some things, because it seems like he wants to maybe, do something to help, but he's not really saying yet. He's just kind of stalling this whole thing, because we know he's one of the big decision makers in this. So what's your political analysis of that situation? Can you see something, can you see this bill getting passed, or probably not, a long shot in the dark before it get passed?
Yeah, so I definitely think the federal government should do everything they can to prevent states from filing for bankruptcy. I know Governor Cuomo of New York came out and made some really tough declarations and statements in regard to McConnell's, suggestion about states should file for bankruptcy, right? I don't think they should. I think that sets everybody back, and again, that has an impact on the poorest, lower class members of your state, right? That has the biggest impact on those groups, right? So again, I think we should do everything we can to prevent states from filing for bankruptcy. That's just my opinion. I know it's nuanced, but even I believe the governor of Kentucky, who's a Democrat, I think disagreed with McConnell, right? So, who knows what'll happen? But I think leadership is important, right? You always question who's at the helm when catastrophic events happen, when disasters happen right now. So, you have a lot of inconsistent messaging in regard to the bills, in regard to legislation. At the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi, she has the House, but Schumer doesn't have the Senate. So if you're going to put a bill forth, you have to put something forth that's going to pass both chambers, right? The House and the Senate. And right now, anything that Nancy Pelosi puts forward, it's probably not going to be as strong as she wants it to be, because again, it has to pass the Senate. So I think, that's in the back of her mind, whatever she puts forth. They definitely need another stimulus bill. I think they'll pass another stimulus bill. We'll be interested to see, the nuances of the bill and the allocation of where that money goes, even if it's obviously a couple trillion. It'll be interesting to see what happens. and where the money goes.
Right. So give everyone some tips on, how they can manage and, maneuver through this pandemic financially.
Yeah, great question. So, I think I read a statistic early this year that said like 70% of the country, or 70% of Americans don't have at least $400 in savings, right? So, I don't know whose rent, unless you're on government assistance, is less than $400, right? So most people don't even have, enough to pay a month's rent or mortgage if they hit a hard time like this. I guess this is a time, one, to just kind of reassess, your income, right? I think if you look at millionaires, the average millionaire has at least 7 streams of income, right? So, if you're making 30 or 40 grand a year, or you're making 100 grand a year, I think this is time to really look at your skill set and say, what else can I be doing or fit into my schedule that if, God forbid, we have another infectious disease that impacts the country and there's a lockdown for 2+ months, or I lose my job, can I easily pivot to where I can at least make some income and not be dependent on a $1,200 stimulus check that could take weeks, if not months, to receive, or the government passes some type of bill or legislation to give me some relief. I think that's not an immediate answer, but that's an answer for the long term, right? I think that's the best thing we can do. I also think we need to look at just traditional education, right? And what we're doing to apply and prepare ourselves for, one, what we want to do and enjoy doing in work, but 2, where economies are moving, right? Our country doesn't have a lot of manufacturing, right? We just don't, right? We've lost that battle over the past 3 or 4 decades to China. Where we are moving, though, is technology, right? And digital platforms and digital tools and AI, artificial intelligence, and so on, right? So I think learning a new skill.
To back you up, what's artificial intelligence? I mean, I've heard it, I've read it, but I still don't fully understand it. What do they mean by that?
Yeah, so I don't have, a perfect definition. But I will say it has to do with, machine intelligence, right? The ability to kind of predict outcomes where they might happen, right? So for instance, at my company, we have an AI tool that pretty much predicts what will happen with a certain product, right? Whether it's revenue, whether it's how many people it'll impact, and the financial impact of said decision, or COVID-19 continuing on indefinitely for, let's say, another 6 to 12 months, right? We're able to model and say, this is the impact it'll have on your organization, and this is how it'll impact your balance sheet, right? That's a completely different set of skills than, let's say, working with your hands, right? Many of our relatives, we're both Detroit natives. I'm sure you have family members who work for the big 3, right? It's inevitable, right? Like, you can't live in Detroit and either not directly have somebody who's worked for the big 3. Many of those jobs, for what we know, working on the line, are going to be gone. But what jobs will be created is kind of working in offices, working with technology and tools to predict what will happen next. I hate to say it, but
if those jobs will be gone, why do you say those jobs will be gone?
Manufacturing jobs?
Yeah, if that's the case, then were they able to produce all the vents, and they turned over car companies into producing vents and producing masks? So you think that they would get rid of manual labor?
Well, so I don't think they'll get rid of it 100%, right? But I think over the past 3 or 4 decades, you've seen a dramatic decline in those jobs, right? And so you'll always have jobs you can work with your hands, right? Or you can work on a factory line, or do work with your hands. But I think a great example is your local Rite Aid or CVS, right? How many automatic machines do you see, or I forget what you call them, but basically automatic machines where you go up and you scan your own items, right? You put them in a bag. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that didn't exist, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Like Walmart and Kroger, they have that, and Myers.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And I guarantee their workforce today is 10 to 20% less than what it might have been, 10, 15 years ago. And obviously, once you build that tool and you put that kiosk into a Kroger's or a Myers or a CVS, you have an immediate cost, right? of CapEx, but eventually, you know, you don't have to pay for that anymore, as opposed to an employee that you have to pay wages to, and then you also have to give them some form of health insurance, right?
Right.
And you have to pay workers' comp insurance. There's so many other costs associated with an employee as opposed to this one machine, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Again, you're always going to have people working in Kroger's, but the number of physical bodies you have in those places is dramatically less today. And I think the numbers will only continue to decrease, even with retail, right? More and more people are shopping online. That means the JCPenney's, like you said, is filing for bankruptcy or going out of business. Sears, the Nordstroms, the Saks Fifth, they don't need that many employees because most people now, not most, but a lot of people now are shopping online. Same concept.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Somebody else checking in. Hey, Joan. Thank you. Appreciate you on the feed tonight. So, if anybody wants to get in contact with you, you know, for any information, you want to leave everybody with your social, not your social, your social media, your social media.
Yeah. So, obviously anybody that knows you knows me, right? So I think the easiest way might be to reach out to you, but my social media is pretty easy. I think both my Twitter and Instagram, are I am Geoff Pope. So IAMGEOFFPOPE. That's probably the easiest way. My email is pretty simple, jeffpope@me.com. So there's a number of ways to get ahead of me. I get messages all the time on Facebook, so that's a way too. But I would probably say, if they know you, they know me. So it might be easiest just to reach out to you directly, and I'm sure you'll let me know. But yeah, I am Geoff Pope at which is the same on Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest tonight. You were a great wealth of information, and thank you everybody for tuning in on the feed. And I just want to wish everybody a great weekend, and I'll see you all back on Monday next week. Thanks,
Awesome.
Geoff. Thanks for joining me. All right.
Thank you. Peace.
Okay. Good night, everybody.